All right. So, Michael, welcome and thank you for your time today. It's great to see you, man.
Hey, you as well, Rich. Thanks for having me and looking forward to catching up.
Absolutely. So, why don't we start the interview? Give us your name, your company, and a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. So, Michael Vigeant, CEO of GreatBlue Research, based here in Glastonbury, Connecticut. We're a national market research, insights, and data firm helping organizations do what they do better, whether it is delivering a product or a service or taking care of their internal and or external customer bases to the best that they know how.
Excellent. And how did you get into this business, Michael?
It's kind of an interesting story, which I know you know, but I'm a childhood cancer survivor, and I went to a camp for kids with cancer, and my camp counselor founded the company that I now own in 1979. And as a camp counselor of mine, he became a mentor and said, I think you'd be great in this business. Our business, which is largely data driven, needs good storytellers. And he felt that I was in that storyteller scenario and he could teach me the data side. And so strategically around 2010, we kind of divvied up the business and he went his way. I went my way amicably. He was at the latter point of his career, so he was wanting to wind down. And I was just getting ramped up. So he was an amazing conduit to this industry for me, taught me the ropes, one of the industry's best. And here I am 22 years later talking to you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know that we have a background, so I'm gonna indulge you here a little bit to tell everybody about how we met and give that background as well.
So I put this sweater on specifically for that reason today, having a feeling that you'd ask that question. So when I first founded my own company, which was a portion of that divvied up company, my first company name was called the Center for Research, and that was strategic because it was in alignment with the company that I left and split up with Jerry, knowing full well that after a couple of years of transitioning clients and getting our name and our feet under us, that we would rebrand the company. And so I came to you as the lore goes for a brochure, and then a whole rebrand to GreatBlue. Research later on was how our new brand came to light, and we're closing in on the 10-year anniversary. So we've got to talk about the celebration for that next year. So GreatBlue Research is what we are today. The Center for Research is what we were yesterday, or yesterday almost a decade ago. And that was what an amazing process. It was a process of combining the creative skills of you and your team and kind of what I'm about and what our story's about and what our team's about. And I'll never forget the day, and I've told the story many, many times, when you first put the name in front of me, even though it didn't have the graphics, it didn't have what the logo would later become. When you put it in front of us, I knew, but I had to give my best poker face, but I knew that was it.
That's awesome, and it is a great story. And I'm gonna shout out to Tom Cook right now, who was the guy that came up with that whole background and the story about GreatBlue, and it fit your personality so amazingly well. And I remember sitting in the conference room that day and watching your face as Tom was rolling out the
Yep.
brand and the idea, and it was just priceless. If I could have recorded that moment and to see how your reaction was just so, I mean,
Yep.
as an advertising agency, I mean, that's what you want. It just makes a perfect connection for the person that you're trying to brand for.
For sure. And I will tell you, and part of the deal was, as you know, we wanted it to be less about me and more about the organization, but to have the leader be able to really live that brand, and have it really come from the depths within, but have it be team centric was so very important. And it's nailed it. And I've yet to find someone, now that someone watches that, they'll probably call me out, but I've not found anyone yet that doesn't love the brand, and feel that it fits us perfectly. So it was a home run in many ways. So thank you once again.
Well, you don't have to thank me, but I'm so glad that it did work out, and I was just grateful to be part of the process, really. And it's one of my prouder moments, I have to say, going back into the archives. You kind of sift through things and you have successes and failures, and that's absolutely, I consider one of the high successes of my career is, seeing how that brand has not only survived but thrived over the last 10 years, and how you just encompass that brand. It does make a huge difference when the leaders can carry that forward and really live it. So
Yeah, and I know, listen, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurial spirit and what it means to be an entrepreneur and run a business today. But I will tell you, that was a big opportunity for me to stand on my own 2 feet and draw my line in the sand of who we were going to be versus who we were known as before. And it taught me a lot and provided a great deal of confidence to say there's always going to be someone that has an opinion, but root your business, root your brand in what you're passionate about and what you're about, and the rest will take care of itself. And here we are, 15% year over year growth since 2010. Something's working.
And that's an amazing thing. I think that's really so critical is, the belief in the brand. I think too many people discount that as, something that's too fluffy or whatever, but you can put real numbers against brands that perform based on, how well it's adopted, how well it's received, what that messaging is. And so for GreatBlue research, it changed things. And so you said 15% year over year growth. What was it about it that really helped that to happen, Michael?
Yeah, I think the big part was we had to tell our story, right? And the switch of brand gave us a new reason to communicate and contact and reach out and talk to our customers. But it couldn't just be a new logo and a new name. There had to be new depth behind it. There had to be additional strength and bandwidth behind it. For us, at a really important turning point in our industry, 2010, not very long ago, but the market research and insights community was still heavily dependent upon phone and mail surveys, whereas we were going tech and we were going digital. And part of that story is we've unleashed or uncovered and unfolded what the brand has been all about. We've been able to talk to customers and say, how many of your vendors and partners have been able to lower their prices for you and provide you with quicker resources, quicker data at a lower price point over the last 10 years. And that's been something that we've been able to do. I say it all the time. Studies I was doing in 2009 that took 8, 9, 10 weeks, we do in 8, 9, 10 days now. And we're no longer having to charge the Mad Men type study amounts. We're doing it for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time, and we're getting more data. Now, some folks haven't evolved all the way there yet, but it's coming, and our industry has grown massively over that same span. So it was a combination of industry growth, but us really going after and being strategic about our markets, which you really helped us identify through that process.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. Data is so critical, isn't it? It's as you said, it's changed every industry. Every industry is becoming more and more adopted because they have access to so much information, whether from their marketing, from their HR, from your finance suite, wherever it is, research, and having that at your fingertips. How does GreatBlue provide those data points? Are you providing technology? What are you guys doing today to help businesses kind of understand their market and their niches?
Yeah, so that has also evolved, right? We are still very much a custom house or a custom shop where, based on whatever our client's specific needs are at that moment in time, we will develop a custom methodology to address those needs. And by custom methodologies, there's 5 to 7 of them that are out there, whether it's phone or 15 different versions of video and digital. QR codes are making a huge comeback so that we can send out, based on geopostal data, you can send postcards to every single household in a geography have that QR code, they can scan it with their phone and then take the survey, which, believe it or not, is less expensive than what it used to be when you mailed them out the full survey. So all these different methodologies have changed and become available. But more importantly, the data points is people are now asking better business questions. And rather than it would be nice to have 150 data points, they're now saying this is the mission critical component, department, service, product of our business. We need to hone in on that one element, and we need to understand what's driving it, good, bad, or indifferent, whether it's a concept, whether it's an existing service. So for us, we're still building custom solutions and custom research programs, project studies based on their specific needs. But then we also have some data omnibus type services where we have a subscription-based service for the municipal electric and different utility industries out there. So the big one that we have in partnership with the American Public Power Association is what's called the Public Power Data Source. And APPA wanted to become the authority on public power data. And they brought us in as their preferred partner and said, hey, how can we do this? And so we built a platform and a product for them. And so we collaboratively work on that tool together. So there's industry trend type data that is just tracking and omnibus type stuff. But then there's the individual specific data that we're capturing for any organization that we work with.
And if let's say I'm a SaaS business, I'm starting up, how could GreatBlue help me, get my company going or understand my market?
Yeah, so market assessment is a good predominance of what we're working on today, because there's so many new businesses. The whole COVID timeframe where people said, I'm working for this company, I'm miserable, I'm finally going to put that idea or that service together. So, being a 22-year vet of this industry, but having been taught by someone who was 20 years my senior before getting there, you're talking 50 plus years or 45 plus years of knowledge base to then walk in and know what questions to ask. Who is that target market? Identify that there is that need for your service. Identify what their decision-making criteria are, how they're going to purchase your product, your service, what price point makes sense, what issues and challenges. We all know the best sales happen when you're solving problems. And so it's really understanding those problems. And I would really identify that most of the work that we're doing is shining a bright LED light bulb on the problems, but not just what it is. Most folks understand at the surface level what the issue is. They don't understand at the deep level what's driving it, what's contributing, and how to overcome and switch around those perceptions, those behaviors, and in turn, those actions or those call to actions.
One of the things you just said made, resonated with me. I've written a lot of business plans, including, Cofolios, what we're doing, and our mission of empowering entrepreneurs is kind of rooted in everything we do. But as any entrepreneur, when you build your business plan and you start to have to do investor pitch decks and things like that, you have these three circles that you fill out: the total addressable market, the SAM, right, and then the SOM, which is your what is it? Not sustainable. Boy, my mind is it's a TAM, SAM, and SOM, and the SOM is the smallest market, obtainable market that you can go after and know that you can reach. And so I have found over the time that too many entrepreneurs overvalue their SOM, and it really is more of a TAM. And I know investors hate that. They hate to say, it's a $4 billion market. Okay, great. There's lots of those. That means you probably don't know your market well enough.
Yeah.
That seems like something that, if I came to GreatBlue at the beginning and said, this is what we're trying to do, and we need to identify those three, distinct ways in which to manage the market. Is that something that you guys could help with?
Absolutely. And there's a combination, right? There's a combination of that secondary market data that's out there. It's taking that $4 billion industry and narrowing it down to who's buying or utilizing exactly what you offer, right? And so that's where we define what your potential audiences look like, survey or speak to those folks, whether it's in a quantitative or a qualitative fashion, put ideas, put concepts, put designs in front of them and say, okay, does this align? And on the front end, it's not, hey, here's my service. Does this solve your problems? It's, what are your problems? Hey, if we could deliver A, B, C in a very specific targeted manner, how would that help you? How would it not? How do we overcome that? And so you're talking to those end users. So now in many M&A type situations, we're actually starting to get brought in more during that, during that phase of back and forth diligence. It was the word I'm looking for. Sorry, it's been a long week. During that diligence phase, folks are coming in and saying, okay, well, seller is saying their market is this and their customers are all happy, and buyers saying they're all miserable and you don't know your market. We're being brought in as independent, objective organization to go out and survey that market and identify strengths, weaknesses, area of opportunity. And then that starts getting away from who can yell the loudest in that diligence, or who's the more savvy person in the diligence room. It starts to bring some base points for, okay, we can both agree you're doing really well in this area, but maybe not as well as you communicated. And we can agree that I maybe undervalued you a little bit. And so that's tricky, right? That can help a deal and get a deal done. It can also blow one up, right? So it's, we find when there's solid transparency on both sides, they welcome it and they both learn from it.
That's so invaluable to any transaction, Michael. I can imagine that there's a lot of opportunity out there, and it really plays into what we're talking about at Cofolio is really having that data, being able to allow the company to bring together all their data into one place, have it organized so that they can go through a diligent process in a logical way and not have to reinvent the wheel. It won't take you 3 months to put together the 87 documents that are required for that diligence process. It's already there. You've been in that seat, on both sides of it.
Yep.
What are some of the challenges that you've seen, and to your point that you mentioned before, we want to start to understand, what those challenges are, and the things that we're trying to bring to market going to help, as you said.
Yeah. So, listen, I acquired one company and there's been interest from acquirers on a handful of occasions. And, I think what it all boils down to was that for us, we weren't ready to call it a day. We were ready to keep rolling, and we knew we had more inertia and more energy with us. I think the biggest thing for me, and I've heard this from many folks, so this isn't just my opinion, there's no real structure that's out there. Everybody brings, depending on who the buyer is, they're all bringing a different, score sheet and report card to the table, right? They want you because you've grown your business and you have a brand that matters, that you've been able to really do well in a single or a set of industries. You have some core offerings, and so those things are all valuable, right? And that's the reason they're at the table. But then when you get to the table, it's how much can I beat you down to get to the lowest number possible? But we still want you to stay and be happy, or we don't want you to stay and go. And depending on which side of that seat you're sitting on, it never really feels like there's a set of principles that everyone's working off of. And we can say, yes, here's what the rule book is before we sit down to play. I coach kids hockey. I know the rule book when I walk into a rink before I start to compete against another team. If an official makes an incorrect call, I can refer to that rule book and say, this is wrong. And we do it in a nice way. There's no rule book for the transaction, right? And then more importantly, you don't know how folks think about it as you start your business. When you're starting your business, you're just hoping you survive that first 24 months that they say 80% of all businesses are going to fail in. So you're 2 years into it and you've just run this amazing sprint to get up to speed. You've bootstrapped it. Maybe you had investors, maybe you didn't. In our case, my wife and I sold just about everything we had and bought the business cash. So we were that invested. We knew it was my name on the door, and we trusted my relationships and where we were at. Years down the road, no one ever said, hey, Mike, you want to keep track of all this information because one day you're going to need it. So as you get into that first diligence exercise, everybody throws this at you and your world just stops because that's all you have to do. And then you get into that world. I'm a single owner. So it is, okay, what is the actual cash EBITDA of the business, which as a single S Corp, I want to keep as low as possible. So I reduce my taxable, number. Whereas when they sit down at the table, it's, well, you're not really spending as much cash as you should. So, all right, well, let's agree to what the phantom EBITDA is if I was removed from that equation. And then that's where it gets hairy. That's where I would love to see someone come up and say, here's the playbook from day one. Here's the rule book. And obviously there's going to be interpretation. That's where the lawyers and the CFOs and everybody gets involved. But I would like to see, and this is why I was so excited to talk to you, is now finally someone's putting together a playbook. Maybe it's not the rule book that's adopted by everybody. Maybe hopefully that's the goal, but at least we have a playbook that says we're going to agree to this. And this is how we're going to go through this process. Then it gives that larger entity that wants to acquire me, they've got more resources, they've got more lawyers, they've got more people that can dig in, but they want me for a reason. So let's get at the table and be transparent about why we can blend together. And then let's use some common principles to get to that deal.
Yeah, it can even the tables, which is really important for the entrepreneur who doesn't have all that experience. If you have some systems in place where you can say, here is the set of rules that we're going to come to the table with. Does this make sense? At least then you have a starting point, and to be able to just I think through some API technology, which is really a wonderful thing, being able to transport all that data and those documents into that other system, because I've heard from many entrepreneurs, every single investment house or equity firm has their own tool that they're using, whether it's something that they've invested in or somebody that they know. Well, so we need to have a universal tool on the back end of our system so that data just automatically flows. It's set it and let it run, and you don't have to go and repopulate something. One of the guys I was talking to, he has 5 different investment groups in his company. They're at a Series A level, so there's a lot of work there. So every quarter, he and 2 staff members are sitting there like, okay, we're prepping the document list, and this one needs these, and this one needs these, and it's like a 2-day exercise. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How great would that be if it was just automated?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, listen, you've always been a forward thinker with those sorts of things. You're hearing the challenges of the businesses that you've worked with, and so it's no surprise to me that you've come up with a solution.
Well, I give credit to my partner Chris, who's really this is his brainchild. But I saw it as soon as he said it, and it made complete sense. Having started multiple businesses like you, I'm a entrepreneur at heart. I do this a lot, and we know we have certain challenges out there, and if you can make the process simpler and get to the things that you like to do, I'm sure you don't like to do diligence documentation. That's not who Mike Vigeant is, but you spent a good amount of time doing it if you went through 4 different processes, right?
Yeah. And so, and from that perspective as well, I also think you're starting to see more, EOS is one of them, entrepreneurial operating systems. It's how you're running a business, right? So you're seeing more of those. There was no how to run a business, there was lots of books that gave you suggestions and ideas, but and maybe it was around back then and I just didn't see it. But one of the big things for me, in addition to what you're talking about with Cofolio, is that representation and that data management behind the scenes. But on the front end, understanding how to run, but more importantly, how to scale your business. there was, there was 5 iterations of our business processes that we went through that were a waste of time because we were building the process to our current level, which a year later or 2 years later were 15-30% different than what we were doing back then. So we had to readjust the process, and it was a lot of trial and error. And I look back at some of those processes and I say, man, had I started running it this way back then, we'd probably be triple our size. And more importantly, understanding the value of assets and expenses and where you're spending your money and how that helps you in evaluation versus how that hurts you in evaluation, I would have spent very differently over the last 12 years as well.
Wow. Okay. That's really important to, I think, learn and hear that, these things can change the decisions that you make over time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What are some of the tools that you're using today to manage your business? What do you have, a marketing stack and a finance stack that you have in place?
Yeah, so for the most part on the marketing side, it's it's an inbound outbound campaign with internal staff. HubSpot's really the tool that we're utilizing. We found that there's been some really good API leverage there. We've built our own kind of version of a Power BI dashboard. It's not as complex. It's not as deep as what you're talking about. From a transactional standpoint and accounting standpoint, I have an outsourced resource that I use. My accountant really is my accountant / CFO. Rather than hiring that in, I outsource that out. And so we're not a heavy transaction. We're not selling widgets. So from that standpoint, we're not transactional heavy. So QuickBooks for us is, works fine on the accounting side. And again, my accountant and her team are really running that. And so all of the decks, all of the stacks, all the reports, all those things we've built together. Her and I have taken all of that information that we've learned in all these different diligence and said, all right, let's now build the package, right? And let's have that package readily available. And we've gone back in time. Actually, COVID was really good for that. We went back in time and used that time to really understand the numbers of the business at a deeper level. Listen, when you're growing every year, you don't worry so much about the depth of why you're growing, the detail behind why you're growing, because whatever you're doing is working, right? When you hit a COVID year and you're like, wait a second, the brakes just got hit. What is our core group? Where are we going to hit first? And we knew that core group before it hit, but we dug deeper into the process of running the business. It was when I had time to think. The project level had slowed down. We're lucky during COVID in that we're a very regulated industry customer base. So they can only hit the pause button for so long before they have higher powers that they have to report back to. And that was a strategic decision of our firm many, many, many years ago. So we knew we'd be okay if we could weather the storm, and we were, but it allowed us the time as a business to really dig into that business and really understand what our numbers were about. And we built new budgets based on those. We're spending better now because of the data that we looked back on. So again, had we known that 5 years earlier, because she's been my accountant all along and she's been great at helping us understand. But I had different visions and versions of what I thought growth looked like and how to spend to get there. And now that we're on the same page and understanding some of the historical wins and losses, we're able to make better decisions.
And do you have specific KPIs you track in that process, Mike, that you can share with people? Like what's really critical, one or two that make a difference for you?
Yeah, so the big one for me is gross revenue by full-time employee, right? So we're 12 full-time employees, and I think the number as of today, we've got a new class coming in for training starting tomorrow, but I think the new class as of today is around 42 or so on the part-time side. So our call center folks, we still operate a large call center, inbound and outbound. But the reality is that the gross revenue per full-time employee is really the key metric for me. I know my sweet spot when we're earning and we're really efficient. Obviously, our margin numbers, obviously our P&L, but we try to keep it simple, right? all of our data, we really got broken down because the industry changed, right? So what was the cost of a completed survey by telephone in 2019 is very different today. I can give you one metric. We just completed a study for a municipality, and in 19, 1 in every 51 phone calls resulted in a completed survey. That same municipality in 2020, late 2021, was 1 in 247 calls to a completed survey. And oh, by the way, minimum wage went up during that time. Oh, by the way, everything else got more expensive during that time. So knowing our hourly costs and knowing our labor costs, which, those are the basics in business, right? But we're a heavy service industry. Our labor is the big thing. So if I can track our gross rev to that full-time employee, the part-time employee can scale up and down appropriately based on workload. So I have some levers that I can pull there. But if I overspend on the full-time labor, that's where we get into trouble. So I'm not going to share the number with you, but
No.
I know the number down to about a $25,000 window, which when you're talking millions of dollars, to know it to that number, we have a lot of data to support where that number is.
That's terrific. And I think that's an important lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs is you can get crazy with KPIs. I mean, you can have a list of 87 things. You've got to focus in on the thing that makes the difference for your business.
Yeah.
And really make sure that you know what that is. And because for a SaaS business is going to be different than for a research business, which as you said, is very much labor dependent. You have to have the right people and you need to be able to achieve those numbers. And so
yeah, for sure. And sorry to cut you off. There's one additional one that I think is really important. And we were never a great sales organization because, again, we were so relationship heavy. I think another metric that is really important, particularly as you go down that investor path, is what is your metric from hello, my name is, to thank you for signing our final agreement? You need to know how many contacts, and we have that broken down, and we're running the data. We've been tracking it now for over a year, so we're now really starting to compile our metrics onto, if it is a brand new industry that we've never served, it's this many contacts, meetings, proposals, face to face before we can close a deal, versus repeat customers in our existing industries is a much smaller number. But knowing those numbers, now you say, all right, well, it's not just you call them up, do you need a deal? It's throughout the year. It's that relationship. It's how you're managing that relationship, but asking key questions along the way.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. I know for our business, we talk about top of funnel and then, what you're able to close. And there's a few different things in that space that we can track, but know it for your business, understand what's important, and don't get caught up in the multitude of different things that you can track, because it can be a little bit of diversion, right? You can get lost in it. Is there somebody as you kind of build your business and kind of continue forward that you look up to, or you say, this person has served as a mentor for me?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Lindsley, the founder of the Center for Research and Public Policy, that very first company, just sent me a note not too long ago that he officially retired. He passed down his version to his daughter, Brooke, who I signed her reference letter into college. So still a great relationship. Kevin, Jerry is probably that number one mentor. Kevin Anaskovich, who worked for Jerry and was leaving to start his own company. At the time I was coming in to work for Jerry, I actually replaced Kevin in many ways. Kevin has gone on to be an entrepreneur, and he's the CEO of a large company right now that focuses on creating communications for folks in health issues. So it's creating comic books for kids that just, going through diabetes and learning about diabetes. And it's great organization. Kevin, during a little hiatus, came into the business and worked for me for a few years, worked with me. I was more working for him during that time, but somebody that knows all of what we're talking about, it's such a deep level. And he taught me so much during those 2 years that he was with me about how to evaluate, how to prepare, how to lead, how to understand your numbers. So those two really hands down were the big ones. Ironically, They both had connections to Jerry, one being Jerry and the other I met through Jerry. So that sphere. And I would also say, two gentlemen from my industry, competitors of mine and partners of mine, Steve Schlesinger Associates, one of the largest players in the market research insights industry. Steve is a legacy. His mother started the business, and Steve has grown it to an amazing size. But Steve, even as this industry mogul, will still take the phone call and say, how can I help? And Meryl Dubrow, they're best friends, and they're really, two of the champions in our industry that pull CEOs together from our industry every January and say, hey, let's all meet up. Let's get together. Let's share best practices. Let's build our industry. So, Meryl's a competitor of mine, a great friend of mine, and also a mentor of mine. Steve is more on the partner side, but guys that have passed along their knowledge to make my business better. Even though at times we may be going after the same client, and there's times that we're using each other's services. So, those four individuals really come to mind. And then the final, from a business perspective, and I would say the final mentor personally falls with both my mother and my wife. Single mom, raised me, taught me what it was like to grind and to work hard, and to just make stuff happen. And every entrepreneur will tell you, there is someone, whether it's a spouse, a partner, a friend, that is their support system behind the scenes. And none of my success or our firm's success happens without the support of my wife. So there's 6 for you.
Well, thank you. That's amazing, and it shows what kind of personality you are, because you attract the energy, and I think people like to be partner with you, Michael. And I love the point that you're partnering and being friends with the people that are competitors, and that's a lesson for everybody out there. Anybody who will listen to this podcast, take that away as understanding that it's a big world out there, and the more you can share, the more you will grow, and the more you put out there for others, the more it'll come back to you. And I think that's a really important point in life. And the last thing I'm gonna say here is, this is kind of philosophically something that I've seen in Michael for many years, because I also know that you have given back to the Make-A-Wish Foundation for all these years, and because it was important to you. And I want to just touch on that real quick, Mike, because it's significant, and I think it's worth being heard.
Yeah, thank you. It was interesting having been one of the first Make-A-Wish kids in Connecticut, and I think, and I forgive if I'm not, but I think I was also one of the first Make-A-Wish kids to ever serve on a board for a Make-A-Wish chapter, and so that was again an important part of my history. And being one of mathematically the first 100 Disney wishes, I think one of my coolest moments as an individual was to be at the wish that was granted to the 100,000th Disney Wish recipient. I was in Anaheim at the Make-A-Wish conference, and I walked up to the family and I introduced myself, and it was a 12-year-old boy who was out on the boat, and they had this big celebration. And we did the math ahead of time. I said, well, I was one of the first 100 Disney Wishes, so it's nice to meet you, the 100,000th winner or recipient. And the mother just broke down and just sobbed. And she said, we haven't thought about our child being 40. And I was 40 at that time, right? So, those were the things. And while my tenure at Make-A-Wish came to a wrap, any chance I get to support them and support the organization. But I've really turned in my time into really more mentoring now. I'm working and coaching a high school student right now that is doing their senior research project. And we've worked on building the survey. We're going to launch the survey out today, and it's about finding joy and greater levels of empathy in the work that we're doing. So that's been fun. Coaching, those sorts of things. Those are ways that I enjoy giving back and shake it up. And it's been a lot of fun. But one last point on that, communicating with your competitors and other industry folks is, and we talked about this earlier in this segment about being focused on what we can really capture from a market base. And some of those guys are dealing with larger clients or smaller niches that I'm not. So it's in the right interest of my client or the prospect that I have in front of me. If they say, here's what I'm looking for, and I know I can't do that deal, I pass it over and say, here's someone that's going to give you the same level of service that you expect from me, and they're going to nail, and they know that industry better than we do. And that's that transparency that has to be present. And so that happens, and those guys have thrown bones to me as well. And so that's, I think, a great way to make it work. And that, that helps build true, long-lasting relationships.
Well, Mike, thank you, because you stated a word here that most entrepreneurs don't hear every day, and that's empathy. I think that's such an important part of finding success, because it brings it around. It makes it more meaningful when you can be an empathetic person. And I really appreciate you sharing so much with us today with Cofolio. Always an amazing conversation. I'm looking forward, right now I'm already looking forward to the next one with you, because it's always, it lifts me up and makes me feel great. You have so much to share. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Rich. The same all applies to you as well. That's why when you reached out, the answer was yes before I even knew the detail, because I trust what you're doing, and I love the conversation just as well. So thanks as always for having me. Love to share my knowledge. I think that's part of the business owner entrepreneur code. When you learn it, you got to pass it on.
That's right. Well, Mike, we'll see you again soon, and thanks for being part of Cofolio.
Thanks, Rich. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
You too, my friend.